This is the 415ers podcast. Evan Giddings and Marc Grandy coming at you as always 3 times a week on the Odyssey Sports Podcast Network, powered by 95.7 The Game. The 49ers get their 10th win of the year, 7th win in a row. They wrap up the NFC West division crown. They secure themselves at least the 3rd seed in the NFC playoffs after beating the Seattle Seahawks tonight up in Seattle 21-13. I mean, Marc, I know it's kind of hard to sort of, when we talk about the defense, focus in on one guy because there are so many great players, and it all starts with Nick Bosa. But tonight, we heard it around the station, just the amount of people yelling and using Dre Greenlaw's name. If you told me that Fred Warner was the best linebacker on the 49ers, I couldn't refute that. If you also told me that Dre Greenlaw was the best linebacker on the 49ers, I couldn't tell you no. That's how good he was tonight. And I know that Seattle is synonymous in many ways with the Legion of Boom because of the way that they played, the way that they hit. But tonight, up in Seattle, it was a guy in red, white, and gold that made me think about the Legion of Boom, and his name was Dre Greenlaw.
He is making a name for himself against the Seahawks. He's obviously been phenomenal all season long, but if you remember back to his rookie year, 2019, of course, you remember the goal line play. I'll get to that in a second. But the first game against Seattle that year in Levi's, it was a Monday night game. I believe it was around week 8 or week 9, and I think it was the Niners' first loss that year. They were, 7-0 or 8-0 to start that season, something like that. And in overtime against the Seahawks, Dre Greenlaw had an interception of Russell Wilson down in the red zone, and a Seahawks touchdown would have won that game for Seattle. And Greenlaw picks off Russell Wilson and really comes close to returning it all the way to the house for a walk-off pick six in overtime. He ultimately falls short, and then the Niners kicker, who they just signed off the street, Chase McLaughlin, misses the field goal. Ultimately, Seattle wins. The rest is history in that game. And then, of course, the final week of the regular season that year, he tackles Jacob Hollister an inch short of the goal line. Niners win. They win the West. They get the 1 seed in the NFC. They ultimately go all the way to the Super Bowl. That was just as a rookie for Dre Greenlaw. And to your point, he was phenomenal on Thursday up in Seattle. This time, he forced that fumble against Travis Homer that led to the Christian McCaffrey touchdown late in the first half. And, he's just making a knack for leading this team in tackles every single game. He wasn't up there. This time he was tied for the second most. Diamador Lenore, who had a pretty good game, 10 total tackles. Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw each had 8. But Greenlaw, not only did he force that fumble, he also, got his hands on a couple of passes. He is very quickly becoming one of the best linebackers in football. And it's only because he's playing alongside Fred Warner that he doesn't get the credit he deserves. I think we're finally seeing him get that credit. Not only should he be a Pro Bowler this year, Evan, he should be an All-Proer this year, Evan. He is that good. You do not have as good of a defense without 2 elite linebackers. The Niners do. And, a lot of people kind of toss around, is this the best linebacking core in football? There is unequivocally no doubt about it now. Certainly, with Dre Greenlaw's emergence this season, there is no linebacking unit in the National Football League that comes close. Dre Greenlaw, Fred Warner, Azeez Al-Shire, Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles as your 4th linebacker is insanely good. This team is loaded, and Dre Greenlaw is a big part why this defense is so good.
And that's what makes a dominant defense. It's not just one group being extremely good. Of course, we're talking about 3 levels, secondary, linebackers, and the defensive line, but it is having depth and quality at each spot. And I know that they have dealt with some injuries this year. Of course, Emmanuel Mosley being the one that has probably hurt the most, along with Jason Barrett, who came back and then unfortunately got hurt. So your secondary has taken some hits. Jimmy Ward has been in and out, but he played tonight, made some plays. The defensive line has gotten healthy with Eric Armstead, who is also really good tonight, and maybe goes a bit unnoticed with how many gaps that he creates on the defensive line. Nick Bosa does what he does, and again, 15.5 sacks is that is incredible, and he's got 3 more games to grab some more. But the secondary with Hufanga, who also came up with a forced fumble tonight. I know the 49ers didn't grab it, but D'Amico Ryans just has so many weapons at his disposal, and they all sort of complement each other. Like, we're talking about the linebackers and Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner. They do similar things, but they're different players, and together, I mean, I wouldn't put them up with Patrick Willis and Navarro Bowman, but when you think of those two guys, two individually great linebackers, but together they cover so much of the field, they hit so hard, and they take away so much in the running game that they seemingly are two guys, but they play as one. Like, that's the way that the Niners' entire defense feels to me, is that someone is going to be in a certain spot. It's just a matter of which number pops up, but they're always in the right place, and they always have a knack for where the football is going to be, to the point where even if the Seahawks are done, I know Kenneth Walker had a little dump off that went for a big gain late in the game that turned into that 10-yard touchdown to Noah Fant, but the defense for the 49ers, like, it isn't just that they bend but don't break. Like, they don't bend, like, at all. I mean, they barely give up first downs and third situations. They put the defense behind the eight ball because they don't allow them to run. I thought Seattle was going to try and use Kenneth Walker a lot more than they did tonight, but they just simply couldn't. One, because they fell behind by double digits early, but two, because the defensive front was able to stop the run with four guys, maybe five. And of course, Geno Smith is having 3 seconds or less to get the ball out. So on the outside, all you have to do is cover for a certain amount of time. You can press, you can play back. Like, they have so many different ways that they can beat you, because at all three levels, they have a quality that, in my opinion, is unmatched this year in the NFL.
Yeah, 3 sacks for the Niners defense in this one. Nick Bosa had one, as you mentioned, to get over 15 sacks. Talanoa Hufanga and Samson Ebukam, they were really all over Geno Smith all game long, and they made him super uncomfortable. I mean, how many times did the Amazon broadcast cut to a close-up of Geno Smith, and he is just screaming at someone, on his side of things? He was upset, flustered, and the Niners made it difficult on him all game long. And it's not just about sacks. We spend so much time focusing on the sack numbers, and it's why Nick Bosa is one of the best players in the NFL, 15 and a half sacks on the year. The Niners, of course, have only played 14 games. He's only played 13 games. He's incredible. But they got to Geno Smith way more often than those 3 sacks suggest. He was pressured, it seemed like, on every other drop back of his, and he threw the ball a lot in this game. Geno Smith, against the 49ers being down for much of the game, he threw the ball 44 times. Niners were on him a lot. A quick note on Nick Bosa. He's the 5th player since 2000 with back-to-back seasons with 15 or more sacks. You look at some of the other names, the 2 Watts, TJ and JJ, DeMarcus Ware. You go back into the 80s, Lawrence Taylor, Reggie White. I mean, these are elite of the elite pass rushers that Nick Bosa, now that he's gaining some years in this league, is putting himself into conversations with. Nick Bosa is not just one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. He is one of the best pass rushers this game has seen. That's how good he is. He's not just good for his generation. He's good across the entire history of the game. He is incredible. He is a game wrecker. And we spend a lot of time talking about the Niners linebacking group. They're the best duo in the National Football League. That is true. But it all starts with number 97 up front. He wrecks games. He wrecks opponents' plans. And he was fantastic again in Seattle.
Yeah, like, he's so good that you forget that he had like a drive extending roughing the passer call, because later on in that drive, he makes up for it by creating pressure and,
that took off the pick six. And
yes,
you still
it
just kind
did.
of brush it off. Like, Nick Bosa's so good. It's okay.
Yeah, in fact, well, people were like, "Oh, he's, what? Oh, I guess he got called for a hands of the face penalty later on too. That looked like a hold, but I mean, yeah, you cannot stop him one-on-one, and eventually he's going to become a one-on-one player, because, like, this is where we've seen him take the next step. We've talked about money time for Nick Bosa. Like, he knows how to pick his spots, and he's been unbelievable. But before we hand out game balls, Mark, though, look, I know it's a party, right? This is a huge win for the 49ers, a huge season for the 49ers, one in which we hope continues to go into late January, maybe even early February. But I did notice one thing tonight, and it was on the offense. and it didn't have to do with Brock Purdy. And it was a little bit, it was something that I was kind of sniffing, which was one of the reasons why I thought that McCaffrey would get the ball, 30-ish times, 25 on the ground. And that was the absence of Deebo Samuel. And I know that we discussed earlier in the week that, look, you won't need him to wrap up the division, but you'll absolutely need him for playoff time. To me, this game did cement to me Deebo Samuel's importance, because there are going to be teams in the playoffs that are much better at stopping the run than the Seattle Seahawks. Maybe even one next week in the Washington Commanders. Deebo Samuel is so important to this offense and what they are allowed to do, because when you kind of get pigeonholed a little bit, it's honestly what Seattle did tonight or tried to do tonight to McCaffrey, to me, is what a lot of teams I thought tried to do to Deebo Samuel in a different way as kind of the hybrid back, but the first 6 weeks of the season, and worked sometimes, didn't work other times. When you have both of them, when you have Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel, this offense can go to another level. And I thought that if Deebo was playing tonight, like they would have beat the brakes off the Birds up in Seattle, because I just think that the Seahawks were allowed to key in a little bit more on McCaffrey than usual. And that's also why we didn't see Jordan Mason as much, because Samuel probably would have been running the football, or at least handling some of the load. I don't know about you, Mark. It was just something that I noticed, or I guess noticed the absence of.
It's kind of interesting to think about, because you mentioned, Seattle without Deebo Samuel is able to focus more on Christian McCaffrey. And to the point that we made earlier, that hurt them a little bit, because they were so locked in on McCaffrey that they let George Kittle escape twice for two big touchdowns. But I think I agree with you. I think this Niner offense is still good enough to beat a lot of teams without Deebo Samuel. It ended up a 1-score game. The game was not that close all game long. And a 1-score game against, this Niners defense is probably more accurately a 2-score game, because you just simply do not score touchdowns and convert 2-point conversions against this defense all that often. But I mean, you're right. You add Deebo Samuel into the mix, and suddenly there's just another electric body that can make tacklers miss to think about. And what does that mean? It means it's going to allow openings elsewhere more often. And we saw, Kyle Shanahan scheme up 2 wide open George Kittle touchdowns in this game. You add Deebo Samuel into that mix, it's going to make things more difficult on opposing defenses. I will say, like I said, I think on our last episode Sunday, or on Wednesday, was that you do not need Deebo Samuel, in my opinion, in the regular season. I think you're going to need him in the postseason, of course. You don't need him now. This offense is good enough without him. But there will come a time where we talk about money time with Nick Bosa. It's money time for Deebo Samuel in big moments in the postseason. That's when he's at his best. That's when the Niners will need him. They will reach another level with him. I in agreement with you there, but I do not quite think they need him just yet.
Well, they won't be able to get him just
Yeah.
yet. It'll take a couple of weeks, but that's
It'll be
something
better to
keep an
have
eye
him.
on.
I'm not saying that,
Yeah.
but it's not like they need him to potentially get the 2 seed, in my opinion.
No.
I think that they are good enough without him.
Yeah, we'll see. I think a lot of that will depend on how much Christian McCaffrey is used, and I don't know how many more games like tonight he can sustain. I think it was just a perfect storm of, look, Debo's out, short week. We're going to have 10 days of rest coming up.
Yeah.
And it's a game in which our quarterback is unfamiliar with the scenario or situation. Didn't look like it for a lot of the night, but, was unfamiliar, and you need a vet to rely on. So
I think we'll probably talk about this more next episode, Evan. I think probably on Monday, but I think we are also undervaluing how important it is to have 10 days off now.
yeah.
That's huge. I mean, we talked a lot, in the middle of the season when the Niners had their bye smack dab in the middle, perfect spot for a bye week. This is also a pretty perfect spot, assuming you can get to Thursday and win that game, which the Niners did. Having kind of a mini bye, a half bye at this point of the season, is a gigantic leg up as they try to catch the Vikings for the 2 seed. We'll talk more about that, I'm sure, in the future, but it's nothing. You can't ignore it. I think it's going to be important for the 49ers.
No, definitely not. All right, as we move on to our game balls, Mark. I mean, I guess you could look at the defensive side of the ball and maybe pick a couple of guys, but to me, offensively, it really just comes down to two. And I guess the question is, do you want to start first, and which one do you want?
I'll let you start first, and you can do your victory lap with Mr. McCaffrey.
All right, Mark. I'm going to get braggadocious here. I told you. I freaking told you on
You did.
Wednesday that Christian McCaffrey, and in fact, I know I framed it as a bold prediction, but I think I started out by saying I don't really think it is because I didn't. Christian McCaffrey was destined to get the football on the ground 25 times or more. This is why he deserves the game ball, because the guy was an absolute maniac tonight on the offensive side of the football. 26 carries, 108 yards on the ground alone. That's 4.2 yards per carry, where the defense knows that they have largely nothing on the other side except for number 23 in white, red, and gold. Plus, you get him the ball out of the backfield. He catches 6 of his 8 targets for 30 yards. It was nothing crazy. It was nothing explosive outside of a 23-yard burst in the first quarter, but it was the tone setting. Again, 9 of the first 12 plays of the game went to Christian McCaffrey to set up the big Kittle touchdown, to set up all of it. Kyle Shanahan, along with Christian McCaffrey, absolutely put this game on their back. And with a Brock Purdy that was not 100%, that was playing his first game on the road, you need a vet to rely on. You need a game changer. You need a game breaker, as you called him multiple times throughout this episode. It was Christian McCaffrey. He was the best player on the field, not even close. And for an offense in the 49ers that only needed 2 scores in this game, Christian McCaffrey created virtually all of them by himself. He was the best player on the field tonight, and he gets my game ball.
Mic drop. Good work. That was fun to listen to. Yeah, I mean that's the easy go-to choice. I mean, he was the best player on the field all game long. 138 total yards. He didn't quite reach the 145 scrimmage yards for a third straight game, but these were hard-earned yards. These were hard-earned yards, and as you mentioned, the defense knew it was going to him, and he was still able to be effective and efficient on the ground. So fantastic pick there. Before I explain Brock Purdy, because he deserves a game ball, I do think that Mooney Ward deserves a shout out on the defensive side. We talk a lot about Dre Greenlaw and some of the others. Mooney Ward was good. He was matched up with DK Metcalf for most of the night. Metcalf did have 7 catches, but 55 yards, less than 8 a catch, longest for 13. He is a game breaker on that side of the ball for Seattle. He did not hurt the Niners that much. He did not have that big play for 35 yards. He didn't get into the end zone. He didn't extend too many drives. Mooney Ward did a fantastic job against him. So I wanted to give him a shout out, but you can't go into Seattle with a rookie quarterback, have him perform like this and not give him a game ball. Brock Purdy was really good once again for the 49ers. Again, the numbers don't blow you away. 17 to 26, 217, 2 touchdowns, both to George Kittle, and he had a big conversion on the ground, just simply not looking like a rookie quarterback. And like Kyle Shanahan said post-game, he's never seen a rookie as poised as this guy. He showed off that poise on Thursday night in Seattle. He was incredible. He deserves a game ball, and he is a gigantic reason, because, the other option is Josh Johnson, who was on the street until a week and a half ago. He's a big reason that the Niners' Super Bowl hopes are still afloat. It's Brock Purdy.
Well said. Well said. And on that note, that will conclude another episode. A true, I know we get a chance to talk about a lot of victories this year, now 10 of them, but this truly is a celebratory episode for the 49ers. They're in the playoffs, Mark. Simple as that.
We're recording this Thursday night. If you're listening Thursday night, I applaud you for being a loyal 415ers listener. But this is a rare victory Friday, Evan. The best possible victory day in the NFL. Victory Friday.
Yeah, you not only do you get to watch stress-free football, but you get to watch stress-free football after a win. So you're automatically going to have a great weekend.
Yeah, and best of luck to all of our listeners in the fantasy playoffs. Kicks off this week. Big deal.
Well, for some of you, I mean, for some of us, we have a bye, but for some of you,
I was going against McCaffrey. Not a good start for me, but
Yeah,
we'll see if
pray
we can
pray
bounce
for Mark.
back.
He's behind the 8 ball or the 23 ball, I guess.
Brian, if you're listening, I'm going to come back. Don't you worry.
95-7 the game. This fantasy league's heating up, Mark. I'll tell you what. But on yeah. Oh, also I do want to shout out. There was look, we've had
Yeah.
a lot of people that have said positive things about the podcast. We appreciate you. Obviously, this is our first year doing this. Odyssey was kind enough to give us this platform to discuss the 49ers, the ups, the downs, and everything in between, which has obviously been a lot this season. So, we appreciate all of those of you who have rated the podcast, who have listened to us. And Mark, you got a shout out.
Yeah, shout out 49er Bill from San Jose, repping the 408, gave us 5 stars and a nice review on Apple Podcasts. So if you enjoy listening to this, we really appreciate that. But we would love a review, a rate, of course, anything that you can help to spread the word. We would really enjoy it. So shout out 49er Bill for giving us a nice 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We appreciate it, 49er Bill.
I don't know if he was listening to, every time I say download, rate, subscribe, please give us 5 stars. I don't know if he's listening to that or he just likes the content, but either way, he obliged us, Mark. So Bill's the man.
He is. Bill's the man. We appreciate you, Bill.
Bill's the man. Kyle Shanahan is the man with the plan throughout this season. Christian McCaffrey was that dude today. Big Brock up in Seattle doing his thing. I got dangerously close there, Mark. Dangerously close. 10-4. They won the division. The Niners are back in the playoffs yet again. First division title since 2019. And on that note, we will talk to you next week on Monday after a Victory Friday episode on the 415ers. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time.